Hola, mi amors. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Living Environment. Okay, let's start just by recapping our plan so you know where we've been and where we're going. We've done this. We did our making our artifacts. We learned all about germs, all about pathogens on Friday. And today we're gonna really get a recap, a sort of an overview of what is the coronavirus. And we're really gonna focus on asking good questions, okay? Just a reminder that on Friday is your final assessment for this. And it's going to use a lot of the questions that you asked today. So really focus on making sure you're asking good questions today because that's going to really contribute to what your assessment looks like on Friday. That's the master plan, my friends. Okay. I'm gonna take a moment here to talk about something that I don't usually talk about, but it's a lot about sort of how it feels when we study something. So we can look at the coronavirus, like miramos la coronavirus con like dos lunettes, like two sets of lenses, right? Two sort of glasses to look through. One of them would be personal, social, emotional. This is all the stuff about how coronavirus makes me feel. There's a bunch of questions I might ask if I'm thinking about the personal, social, emotional feelings that come up when I think about coronavirus, right? How does it make me feel? How does it affect my family, my shelter, my food? How does it affect my relationships, right? You might be feeling lonely. You might be like stuck waiting in line for food or shelter. You might be sick yourself, or maybe someone in your family has been sick and it feels really bad. This is one way to help understand how the coronavirus has affected our community, right? And this is sort of the job of the counselors. Maybe you talk about this in history, sort of thinking about like how it changed our community. Maybe it's something that in ELA you write about, you sort of express yourself. Maybe you express this through art. Okay, there's a lot of ways to think this way. Another way to think, or another lens, un otra lunes, is to think about it scientifically, okay, or with my science lenses. So these would be questions that I can answer using data and using information. ¿Dónde están la mayoría de los casos de coronavirus? Who's most at risk, right? Maybe it has something to do with how the virus acts. How does the coronavirus spread from one patient to another? And like, how does a doctor treat coronavirus, right? These are all science questions we can answer using science. Now, here's where it becomes a big, crazy problem, right? And in general, the information that we get from the news can be really confusing and really, really emotional. And that's for a bunch of reasons. Maybe you don't like the president. Maybe you don't like the governor. Maybe the way they talk is offensive. Maybe they're saying things that are really insensitive. It's hard to know, right? When I watch the news, honestly, sometimes I feel scared. Sometimes I feel muy cansada, right? And sometimes I feel angry. Sometimes the news pisses me off. I'm like muy furioso. That's normal. And part of why I think this happens is because the news doesn't use a good lens, right? It mixes up sort of the emotional lens and the scientific lens. So my goal, and Mr. Chervin and Miss Tara and I talked about this a lot. We talked for hours about how we were going to represent this information. We're really only going to use our scientific lens, okay? So we're going to try to think like a doctor or a scientist, okay? We are not going to think like a politician or a news anchor or somebody who, like a journalist. We're not going to think like that. We're only going to think like scientists. Okay? So my hope is that if we focus on the science, that is going to help feel a little bit more calming. It can sort of help you understand. But as always, if you're noticing that this is kind of making you upset, or it doesn't feel good, or it's like kind of hurting your heart, or maybe it's just too sensitive right now. Maybe you're like, oh, my family is just really struggling right now, and this is too sensitive for me. I really don't want to study the coronavirus. Talk to us now so that we can figure out, like, maybe we study a different disease, or maybe there's another way for us to help you navigate that. Okay? So pause, like, that's sort of where we're at right now. I just wanted to explain why this might be feeling a little funky in your heart. And let's move on, okay? So here's the big goal today. We saw a bunch of like scientific questions, right? Back here, all about the coronavirus. And today we're going to really focus on asking good scientific questions. Now, if I see a phenomenon like this really cool picture of hot air balloons, I could ask a million questions. I could ask so many questions. So I came up with a bunch. These was just like a quick brainstorm. Which balloon is the prettiest? Where are the balloons? Right? Balloons are los globos. Like aerostático, maybe, like in the air. How many balloons are in the picture? How does a balloon fly? How much weight can it carry? ¿Cuántas pesos? How high can the balloon fly? Is it scary to ride in a balloon? And like honestly, like do people like balloons? I don't know. I like balloons. Do you like balloons? Anyway. So some of those questions were scientific and some of them were not. So let's talk about what makes a scientific question. So basically, a scientific question can be answered using data. We can use numbers to show our answer. And it might explain how, it might explain why, or it might explain how much. And sometimes it shows a relationship, right? How something affects something else. And this is important too. Science questions can be simple. They can also be complex. Okay. So these are just some examples of things you might see to help you answer a scientific question. So when you're thinking of a good question, I want you to think about like, what would my answer look like? Is it an opinion? Then it's not scientific. Could I use a chart or a graph or a model? Then it's probably scientific. Okay. All right. So here's my big list of questions, and I just want you to take a second. Sorry, I'm like moving all over the screen. Here's my big list of questions. I just want you to take a second to decide which ones are scientific. So the first ones that I want to highlight are these two. These are scientific, but they're very simple, right? Where is the balloon? That would take one word to answer, right? I could just tell you where it is, and I could just like look at a map to figure it out, right? It's still data. It's information that I can like manipulate or represent somehow. In this case, a map. But it's pretty simple. And similarly, how many balloons are in the picture? Also pretty simple, right? I could just count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I don't know. It's more than 4. Okay. Now, I did also want to highlight some questions that are also scientific, but a little bit more complex. Okay. How does the balloon fly? I might need a model to show how the balloon flies, right? I might need to like show arrows and different aspects of it. How much weight can a balloon carry? To answer this question, I might need to do an experiment, like maybe different than what this girl is doing, but it looks like she's kind of doing an experiment, right? I might need to do some calculations. I might need to do some math and get an answer. And then how high can a balloon fly? I might be able to show this in a graph. Maybe the temperature changes how high the balloon can fly. So again, these would be more complicated. I would have to do some research to figure them out. Okay, non-scientific questions. We talked about which ones were scientific, and I want to highlight these 3 because these are really not scientific. So first, which balloon is the prettiest? Obviously, this is going to change based on what's your favorite color, or do you like a different pattern? Maybe you like stripes and somebody else likes diamonds. I don't know. It's going to depend. Is it scary to ride in a balloon? Now, maybe if you are this little kid who is afraid of heights, it would be scary to ride in a balloon. But maybe you are more like this guy, Alex Honnold. He's like a rock climber, and he does not look to be afraid of heights. So maybe he is not scared. So again, these non-scientific questions are going to change based on who you ask. Okay, and that's why that's so important. So here's a quick quiz for you. I've got 3 questions here. This one's a little hard to see. Let's move this. Okay, got 3 questions here, all about bread. One of my favorite things. I love bread. Which loaf tastes best? How does bread rise? Does more yeast cause the bread to rise more? Is bread a good breakfast? Okay, go ahead and choose which questions are scientific. So if you picked these 2, ding, 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 you're right, you're awesome. These 2 are scientific because I could do an experiment, or I could use a model, or I could use some data to show these answers, right? Maybe I can do an experiment about the factors that cause the bread to rise and be able to explain that better. Same thing with the yeast, right? I could add more yeast and measure it, or I could use less yeast and measure it. Think about that. That would give me some data. Could maybe make a graph from that information. Which loaf of bread tastes best? Not scientific, right? That one is going to change based on who I asked. Is bread a good breakfast? Also, it's going to change. Maybe you have a gluten allergy and you can't eat bread. Then bread would be a very bad breakfast. Maybe you're about to go on a big long run, and then it would be great to have some bread in your system. Okay, so again, top one, bottom one, not scientific. These 2, great scientific questions. All right, what are you going to do today? You are going to watch a video. The video is in both Spanish and English. It's on Edpuzzle, so you don't need to watch both. Just pick one. And you're going to ask, it's going to pause 4 times. And every time it pauses, you're going to go to your Google form and submit 2 or 3 questions, okay? The questions you submit today might be on your assessment on Friday, so ask good ones. Here are a couple notes. I think these are important things to remember. When a question is scientific, it doesn't always mean like you got to put on your lab coat and get out your microscope and figure it out. You can still ask questions about people, about communities, about social, emotional things. You can ask questions about the economy, stuff that doesn't seem like, the scientist puts on their lab coat. As long as you can answer them using a how and a why and you can use data. Okay, that's really important, that you can use data. Maybe you could represent it in a graph or a chart. Okay, so it doesn't have to be like, what's the shape of the virus? It can also be like, how does the virus affect people's income, right? All sorts of things we could answer there. And then this one, I think, is maybe even more important. Scientists often ask and investigate questions they think they know already. And you can ask a question in this video. You can ask questions even if you think you know the answer. That is totally fine. Great scientists, los mejores científicos, siempre están buscando más evidencia para apoyar sus ideas, right? A really good scientist needs more evidence to show that their ideas make sense. So you can ask a question that you think you already know the answer to. Maybe you'll be proven wrong. Maybe you'll get more evidence to support your idea. Okay? So from here, go ahead and watch the video on Edpuzzle, and you're going to submit your questions into the Google form. If you're like, I'm so confused, then come to live lesson, okay? If you're feeling stuck, come to live lesson with me, with Mr. Turban, or con Miss Tara, okay? All right, guys. I love you. I miss you. I can't wait to see what you come up with.